This podcast is sponsored by Talkspace. You know when you're really stressed or not feeling so great about your life or about yourself? Talking to someone who understands can really help. But who is that person? How do you find them? Where do you even start? Talkspace. Talkspace makes it easy to get the support you need. With Talkspace, you can go online, answer a few questions about your preferences, and be matched with a therapist. And because you'll meet your therapist online, you don't have to take time off work or arrange childcare. You'll meet on your schedule, wherever you feel most at ease. If you're depressed, stressed, struggling with a relationship, or if you want some counseling for you and your partner, or just need a little extra one-on-one support, Talkspace is here for you. Plus, Talkspace works with most major insurers, and most insured members have a $0 copay. No insurance? No problem. Now get $80 off of your first month with promo code SPACE80 when you go to Talkspace.com. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com. Save $80 with code SPACE80 at Talkspace.com.
Blog Talk Radio.
The best late-night conservative talk show in America, Sackheads Radio. And listen, there are no people better on the air to give you the best in conservative talk than Sackhead Shaun and Sackhead Clint. And we're working on immigration papers for a certain other guy who happens to work here, too. For those who are tuning in around the world to the best in late-night conservative talk, Sackheads Radio.
Sackheads. Sackheads. Radio. Sackheads. Sackheads. Radio.
The best late-night conservative talk show in America. In America.
In America.
And in this web was a large, I'm pretty sure it was the biggest spider I've ever seen.
It was the biggest spider on the face of the planet. Hey, it's the Sackheads Radio Show. It's the 4th of December, 13 or something like that.
That's somewhere remembering.
All right, good. Sokka doesn't know either. Either way, I know it's December, and that's all that counts. Christmas is right around the corner. Our special guest host in tonight, because, well, Clint has more vacation time than the president does. What? Every time he puts in for a day off, I'm like, really? You kidding me? Another one? Tamara Jackson is joining us. She is the editor for the Black Sphere. She also has her own show on the 405 radio on Tuesday nights. She is also one of the co-owners of Voice Meda. She's at Tami J on Twitter. She is just a dynamo. She's also the full-time fill-in host for
Bill Post.
Bill Post.
Yep, on KYKN AM 1430 out of Salem, Oregon, and it's a Salem affiliate station.
Which is appropriate because it's out of Salem, Oregon. So that works.
I know.
Right.
Well named.
Tami, how are you?
I'm good, Shaun. How are you?
I'm freezing. I'll tell you something. I don't get cold often living where I live in California, but we are in this cold spell.
As are we.
And well, yeah, because we're getting the weather after it passed you. It's going south. So it is just frigid. I came in the studio tonight, and granted, we hadn't been in for a few days. It was 54 degrees in the studio, and I had the heater running, and it just broke 69. And that was a good 2.5 hours. So
And what's the temp out there right now?
Outside, it's about 40.
It's 30 here right now, heading to 23 overnight, and we're going to be down to 19 by Saturday.
Yeah, they're predicting we're going to be in the 20s overnight here, too, which is just unheard of. And especially with all the agriculture we have in the area, you know, it's going to take a beating. And
oh, yeah. I blame Al Gore.
I do, too, because you know what?
He took our global warming, right?
I was just going to say that. What happened to global warming?
I do that every time I'm on. I grab everything you're going to say. I'm really adept at that.
I really think that's what makes you so amazing is you have just such an amazing insight to everything. So
and I read your mind. So
and you read my mind. Already, and I knew by saying I was chilly out here, I was getting it in the chat room. You're from Boston. What happened to you? Evil Rooster is in the chat room tonight. That scares me. It's not even regular Rooster. Quite simply is in Boston, you dress in layers. When you're from a cold area, you dress in layers so you're used to it. Anything up to about 45 degrees. After that, you can wear a T-shirt and shorts. But I'm so adept to living out here. I don't bring layers around with me like I used to. Like when I was,
your blood has gotten thinner. That's
what everyone says too. But my skin's gotten thicker, so I think that offsets itself.
But your head is harder.
My head's a lot harder. Believe me, there are plenty of people that'll tell you that, and for numerous different reasons. It's this has been an amazingly busy news week, if you will. I want to talk about some lighter side of things. So, did you hear that Obama's uncle, half uncle, whatever you want to call him, is currently in his IRS hearing for deportation?
Yeah, but I heard he gets to say, and the thing I don't like, his name is Omar. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
My Persian kitty, who is adorable and wonderful and loves me, his name is Omar, so we want to protest the name.
I was going to bring that up, and I was going to have to say, well, you know, he may have to go too, Tammy. I'm just saying,
no.
I want to know, though,
with me.
Contrary to what your Omar, did your Omar ever live with Obama's uncle? Because
No.
Okay, Obama's uncle saying that he did, and he knew he was illegal when he did back when he was going to Harvard University.
Well, he probably also knew that he knows where the birth certificate is. No wonder Uncle Omar gets to stay.
Yeah, and that's so weird because, you know, here's the White House coming out straight away saying, hey, yeah, he doesn't even really know him, and it was his uncle's side, and blah-blah, blue. And this guy's coming out, and he's like, oh, yeah, no, he stayed with me. He lived in my house for a while when he was in college, which I have to look into it because I don't know exactly what town. I want to say it was somewhere out the Mass Pike a little ways. And I could probably debunk that argument in a minute if I
And
need.
you could make up a town, Shaun, and since I'm not familiar with the Boston area, I would say, oh, yes, that town, of course. I would buy it.
So, no, so it's in Framingham. So it's really, Framingham is just out the Mass Pike from Boston, which is where Harvard is. So it's not really Harvard. It's not really unreasonable to think that he drove the 30 minutes on the Mass Pike or took the train, the T, from Framingham to go to Harvard University. So I think it's possible that he could have lived there. I'm not confirming for sure, but I just think it's amazing that, you know, he won't even acknowledge, essentially for the most part, that it's his uncle when it's his dad's brother.
Well, maybe in a few years he'll write Dreams of My Uncle. and then we'll hear the real story.
Yeah, well, Dreams of his uncle will just be getting drunk and driving around, so it's really not that interesting. But it's always nice to know that when relatives of the president just can come out and break whatever law they want and then try to hide behind the president. I think of, what was it, Clinton's brother?
Yeah.
You know?
Billy?
Yeah.
Billy Boy Clinton.
Yeah, it's mind-boggling to think that, okay, my nephew's the president. Even if I do know him and even if we're as tight, I'm not going to make this public. I'm going to back-channel it and do it the good old-fashioned way like everyone else does. And he's like just coming right out. Maybe that's just the boldness of the whole family, and maybe that's where Obama gets it a lot of times for some of the crud that he throws out. But he's like, oh, yeah. No, we're tight. He knows I'm here.
Boldness is the term we use on polite radio.
This podcast is sponsored by Talkspace. You know when you're really stressed or not feeling so great about your life or about yourself? Talking to someone who understands can really help. But who is that person? How do you find them? Where do you even start? Talkspace. Talkspace makes it easy to get the support you need. With Talkspace, you can go online, answer a few questions about your preferences, and be matched with a therapist. And because you'll meet your therapist online, you don't have to take time off work or arrange childcare. You'll meet on your schedule, wherever you feel most at ease. If you're depressed, stressed, struggling with a relationship, or if you want some counseling for you and your partner, or just need a little extra one-on-one support, Talkspace is here for you. Plus, Talkspace works with most major insurers, and most insured members have a $0 copay. No insurance? No problem. Now get $80 off of your first month with promo code SPACE80 when you go to Talkspace.com. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com. Save $80 with code SPACE80 at Talkspace.com.
Taxes was waiting around for your taxes to be done, which led to worrying about not getting any money back. Now Taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes in a day to get you up to $4,000 fast with a refund advance loan. Now this is taxes. Intuit TurboTax. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Expert filing only available with TurboTax Live Full Service. Refund advance has $0 loan fees and 0% APR. Refund advance loans may be issued by First Century Bank, N.A. or WebBank. Terms apply. Subject to approval.
Another B word that farmers might be using.
Yeah. And me, if you're not on the air, let's be honest.
Yeah, let's be clear about this. Hey, Shaun, quickly to butt in here, a bunch of my friends are asking me, where is the Sackhead radio chat? Where do they find that?
So if you go to Blog Talk Radio, and actually, I believe I sent you the link on your Twitter, and it's on our Twitter at Sackheads. I'll put it up right now. And
I went to one link, and there was an error message. And so then I had to query on Sackheads, and it came up in the right place. But
that error message is just the fact that you were looking for our show. It couldn't possibly believe that you were trying to find us to listen to us. Computers are really ingenuitive nowadays, and they kind of figure things out on their own. They're like, really? You know, they give you that warning.
IA going on over there at Blog Talk Radio.
But when you click on the link... When you click on the link, it'll open up our Blog Talk Radio page, and the chat is just underneath there, and they can click and join in the chat room that way. And I think it looks like a bunch of them might be figuring it out now as we speak, Tami, so that's huge, and I welcome everybody into the chat room. Please enjoy, and like I said, Evil Rooster's in the chat room tonight, so that should be interesting. Let's see. Other quick news that happened today, they released the Newtown 911 calls. And I listen to them. I don't really recommend listening to them unless you have this amazing need to. It's exactly what you expect it to be. It's horrific calls from people who are in a life-or-death situation when they're being attacked by a monster. And that just kind of points out that it's only a matter of time before this is right around the time they'll start boosting the anti-gun rhetoric coming out of the White House so they can start using these 911 calls. And just like he did after he paraded those young children on stage, it'll be almost that sort of thing. I get the Freedom of Information Act. Nobody appreciates it more than us in our field. I certainly get having to release certain evidence. This is one of those ones where I'm always like, do they have to release it? Can it be something that you can go in and request it and they'll send it to you without issue? But do we have to be putting it all over the place on the media? Again, I am not one to stifle First Amendment. I'm certainly not one to think that anything should be held back, and that's not what I'm saying. But I just think of the families involved in this, and now every darn news media on the face of the planet, and this is why I will not play any of these tapes, it's just repeating these over and over and over. And it's just gut-wrenching to me. And it brings up such a horrible memory for those folks. And it's ad nauseum. From the moment they were released today, every news alert I've set up on my phone, email, TV, what have you, all of them popped up in front of me. And I just kept thinking, the family of the victims that were affected by this madman, and that's what it was, have to relive this yet again. So, and it does cut into that, responsible media thing. Again, if you want to go out and say, hey, if you want it, ask us, we'll give it to you. Yeah. But when these media pundits and news agencies and stuff just play them ad nauseum, I heard it 6 times on my way over here today on different stations, and
wow.
And I'm just like, do we really need to keep doing this? Do we really need to make these folks relive this? We all know it's out there. We all know how to get it. You can talk about it, but that's one of those irresponsible media things, and a lot of right and left, it's the media entities that do it that just kind of get me upset. There's just no need for it. So that's my little spiel about that. Again, I think they should be, especially for education, et cetera, they should be available. There should be no stifling whatsoever. But I think this is one of those times when media needs to be responsible and say, hey, you know what? If you want them, they're on our website, but we're not going to play them ad nauseum. We're not going to remind family members, and not just the Newtown family members, any family member that's been affected by violence and things of that sort, it's like when people replay the 911 tapes and from 9/11.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing. It's like, I believe me, when it comes to history, I've listened to those tapes a million times for so many different reasons. But I sought them out. I didn't want them jammed down my throat. And if that was my family member, I don't know if I'd want that out like that either. So that's my 2 cents on that. Yeah.
Well, with the Newtown situation with the murders there, if it were me, I would say let's do something, silence, a prayer, something in memory of those precious children. I'm really big. One of the things I like to do, Shaun, and I get this cue from Hugh Hewitt, who's really great about, and he's got some things where, for instance, if there's somebody that's committed an atrocity, he doesn't want to highlight that person. So he doesn't want to have the person's face up on the page. He wants to talk about the victims more and not aggrandize the perpetrator. And I really like that. So when I'm writing a post or an article, like when I wrote about Boston, I didn't want to have the pictures of the 2 brothers all over the place. I mean, they had to be there initially, but from that point forward, I would rather do things that uplifted and showed our support of the people in Boston as opposed to glorifying the perps. And I kind of like that notion that okay, they might do it to bring glory to their heinous cause or to themselves, but we're not going to give it to them.
Just a Google search. No, I agree. And in the same line, I kind of wrote mine.
Are you on the phone with your mother while we're trying to do this? Is that what's happening over there?
No, I was trying to handle production. I've gotten pretty good about being able to. I don't have a mic interrupt button on this microphone. I keep meaning to grab one, so I'm usually pretty good about pushing it away when I'm going to do a little production talk with Sacco. But I could not have brought the microphone any closer to my mouth for that one, so I apologize.
It's all Sacco's fault.
It is all Sacco's fault. No, I agree. When I wrote mine, it's the same thing. When I talk about any tragedy, I try not to highlight. Listen, I think it's important for people to learn the profile of these monsters, but not in a glorifying sort of way. I know why some people say, oh, you have to show that they were human before they. I hate when they talk about, like, he was a normal person with really good friends and this and that. And then one day he just snapped. And then you're like, no, he didn't. Very, very rarely is it just one day. There's always signs in this.
This podcast is sponsored by Talkspace. When you're really stressed or not feeling so great about your life or about yourself, talking to someone who understands can really help. But who is that person? How do you find them? Where do you even start? Talkspace. Talkspace makes it easy to get the support you need. With Talkspace, you can go online, answer a few questions about your preferences, and be matched with a therapist. And because you'll meet your therapist online, you don't have to take time off work or arrange childcare. You'll meet on your schedule, wherever you feel most at ease. If you're depressed, stressed, struggling with a relationship, or if you want some counseling for you and your partner, or just need a little extra one-on-one support, Talkspace is here for you. Plus, Talkspace works with most major insurers, and most insured members have a $0 copay. No insurance? No problem. Now get $80 off of your first month with promo code SPACE80 when you go to Talkspace.com. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com. Save $80 with code SPACE80 at Talkspace.com.
Joe Montana here. In my football days, I knew the importance of a strong defense. Now I'm sharing how you can help defend your health against pneumococcal pneumonia and invasive pneumococcal disease. Are you 50 or older like me? The CDC now recommends vaccination against pneumococcal disease. Even if you're healthy, your age puts you at increased risk and over 6 times greater risk of hospitalization with pneumococcal pneumonia than adults under 50. Schedule your appointment today at vaxassist.com.
Sponsored by Pfizer.
We found out with the Newtown shooter, there were signs that were ignored for years.
Yeah.
And nobody, again, we've talked about mental health in the past with you and I and Clint. And it's one of those things that gets ignored, but let's not turn it around that he was just some normal person. A normal person does not do that at all.
No, I agree with you. And you start looking at the history of these people, and there were a lot of mental situations, a lot of mental illness signs and symptoms that were ignored.
Yep, and it's tragic. It's tragic for even the family of the victims, because the family even of the suspects, because a lot of times, I don't like making excuses for people that don't deserve it, but a lot of time the family members either ignore it because it's a loved one, or they're blind. I think of the Navy Yard shooter. He was away from his family for a few years, and they saw the signs. They knew there was something wrong, but they weren't around them enough, I don't think, to really kind of be able to expect it coming. I'm sure some people, when it happens, right, wrong, or indifferent, they're like, yeah, kind of saw that coming. But I don't think that was the case with that family. It seemed like a pretty good family, and I think they were blindsided by it too. So, that's something to go back to. When you talk about gun control, you have to talk about mental health even more so, because outside of just using weapons or firearms, lunatics that are going to commit the atrocities, and as we've said a billion times, it's the lunatics that do it, not the weapons. Right. They will do it however way they possibly can.
Yeah, whether it's with a knife or a firearm or what have you, they can do it.
Yeah, and, we've talked about it. There was an edged weapon attack in China the same day as Newtown, where I think 22 school children were attacked. You look at Oklahoma City, you look at the botched attempted bombing in Times Square by the Pakistani guy. Look at the New York, the Trade Center bombing back in the 90s. So people that are going to do horrific things are going to do. I mean, people run people over intentionally daily. You're not going to stop it by passing ridiculous gun laws. It's mental health that needs to be addressed, and we as a society need to be able to kind of turn around and say, you're not going to stop everything.
Yeah, well, and also, I believe that there's some other things that within our society. One is the proliferation of radical Islamist theology throughout the world, which is pretty heinous stuff. I don't care what anybody says. It's no religion of peace, at least a lot of it isn't, and what they're getting out of the madrasas is no religion of peace theology, let me tell you. Also, there has been such a degradation of morals and moral fiber within our society. And I know I sound like somebody's grandmother, which I'm not, but when I see the knockout game, when I see the things going on that are going on, friends of mine that are in these communities that are high-risk communities have told me that in their lifetime they have seen the family values and morals just go down the tubes. And these kids in these high-risk areas, maybe urban areas, that once upon a time, say 40-plus years ago, were raised in strong family units with respect and their butts in a pew on Sunday and getting stuff, jammed into their head that was good stuff. That's not happening now. A lot of them don't have a dad. They don't have a lot of the things they need to be taking their little hearts and minds and getting some good values in them. So you put those two things together alone, and that creates a lot of havoc in this nation.
Well, you look at Detroit. I think Detroit is one of the biggest examples of that. 60 years ago, Detroit used to be one of the highest what's the word I'm looking for?
Well, it was an economic engine.
Thank you.
They were Motor City, and the city itself was a motor. They really were.
Yeah, thank goodness for Tami. I lost it. My brain locked up for a second. Well, no, and they had a high income in the average household, and they had family units, and then, honestly, the liberals took over.
Yep. And
it went downhill.
Run by Dems into the ground. What is it? Every third building in Detroit is abandoned, and even the ones that aren't are tagged and vandalized. I keep saying I'm going to buy property in Detroit because at some point it's going to be worth more than I paid for it, right? It can't go down any further unless they burn it to the ground and it becomes a new Rome.
Yeah, but even then I don't have to pay for it to be demolition.
No, that's true. Have insurance, fire insurance, and grab your abandoned building in Detroit. That might be the thing to do.
No, it is terrible. But that is an ongoing problem. Then you wonder why areas like that, Chicago, have such high crime rate. It's because we don't address any of the issues. We keep trying to put a Band-Aid on. We keep trying to blame all these non-factors and making them the bad guys. Listen, nobody wants to go out there and turn around and say, Here's the problem. Parents, you're the problem. Schools, you're the problem. Civic leaders, you're the problem. When you have those people, and, I'll give Al Sharpton a little bit of credit when this whole knockout game thing, he actually came out against it and said that it was racist either way. But when was the last time Al Sharpton said that? And I think he was just trying to take the opportunity to look better than Martin Bashir, to be completely honest. Because he's a no good, racist himself, in my humble opinion, and he loves to make money. He's a race baiter. He makes money off of other people's misfortunes when it comes to race, and it's terrible.
Yeah, and I was talking to John Grant tonight, and I said that, what is it with Al Sharpton that he's the incredible shrinking head whose head is man, and his head gets bigger and bigger, and Scott Jones, who was on the show, said, yeah, he looks like a human bobblehead.
He does look like a human bobblehead. I actually want to put him on a little pedestal and put him up on a shelf. Yeah, put him up on the shelf here in the studio. So he'd be like the first bobblehead. So, we could get like our weekly angry racist quip out of him and be like, Al, what do you want to say now? And, all you white people keep me up on the wall. Thanks, Al. Back to you, Clint. Something fun like that, where he could finally serve a real purpose.
There's somebody I quote or talk about every once in a while, and a lot of people don't know that much about him, and his name is Alan Keyes. And some people that do know something about him don't care for him because they haven't really investigated. But I heard him interviewed back in the 90s, and here's a black man. I believe he's devout Catholic, and I met him in person. But to hear him talk, it was really fascinating. He said even during the days of the 50s, when the civil rights hadn't really had effect yet and there was extreme segregation and things going on, the black family was really intact. And it was very intact, in fact, in slave days, and he knows because he's a descendant of slaves. Mm-hmm. But he said in the 50s, these families...
This podcast is sponsored by Talkspace. When you're really stressed or not feeling so great about your life or about yourself, talking to someone who understands can really help. But who is that person? How do you find them? Where do you even start? Talkspace. Talkspace makes it easy to get the support you need. With Talkspace, you can go online, answer a few questions about your preferences, and be matched with a therapist. And because you'll meet your therapist online, you don't have to take time off work or arrange childcare. You'll meet on your schedule, wherever you feel most at ease. If you're depressed, stressed, struggling with a relationship, or if you want some counseling for you and your partner, or just need a little extra one-on-one support, Talkspace is here for you. Plus, Talkspace works with most major insurers, and most insured members have a $0 copay. No insurance? No problem. Now get $80 off of your first month with promo code SPACE80 when you go to Talkspace.com. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com. Save $80 with code SPACE80 at Talkspace.com.
Families that were in these urban areas of cities in the U.S. were very intact. They had dads that were the head of the family. They had moms and dads that were a team that supported each other. And they raised these kids with old-fashioned and, if you will, dare I say this on radio, biblical values, where there was a God that they needed to fear and a dad they needed to fear and love and all these things. And he said our value as a person, we knew that we were undervalued somewhat in some parts of American society, but in those days, from the time they were little children, they were taught that their value came from God Almighty, and it was not ascribed to them by man. And so they had a sense of worth. They were brought up with the great work ethic. So we've seen areas like Detroit and Philadelphia and
Chicago,
areas of New Jersey,
New York, New Jersey, parts of
Boston,
Boston,
gone to hell,
Hartford, Connecticut.
Yes. Yep.
I agree. I know who Alan Keyes is. And it wasn't just, I think we focus a lot of time on the black community because of a lot of times that's where the race baiting comes from.
And that's where so much devastation is right now.
Exactly. But you also look at the Latino communities, it was the same thing. And they, even now to a point, I think they have more of a family unit. But I know growing up on the East Coast, we had a lot of Puerto Rican folks living where I am, Brazilians and whatnot, and they were a tight-knit family when I was growing up. But the older I get, that's falling apart too because government's the easier option. I can go on that welfare.
Government, yeah, because at one time it was private individuals, it was churches, things like that helped out the down and outers, gave them a hand up, got them working, did whatever it took to take care of a widow or an orphan, whatever. But now it's government that's rushed in, and it's not a shame to be pregnant out of wedlock anymore. The government will take care of it. In fact, they'll reward you if you do that.
Absolutely.
So keep having babies without the same dad or without any dad, whatever you're doing. Just keep doing it, and we'll just keep rewarding you. And they've rewarded intrinsically bad behavior, and it's been bad for the individuals, it's been bad for those children, and it's been bad for society. And
well,
this is, you know.
And if it keeps, you know, it can only go so much more before it completely implodes. And I think as time progresses, listen, the government's going to run out of money. It really is. It's going to run out of these social programs. It's going to have to start cutting people. I'm going to talk about Medicaid and Obamacare in the next segment, but at some point, people are going to have to realize that they cannot depend on government. And sadly, the very device that may be trying to destroy them and push them to the government may actually push them to being, quote unquote, families again.
Yeah,
We'll have a few minutes before the break. Rooster brought up a good point in the chat room, and he said that one of the reasons Al Sharpton came out is because he was publicly criticized for not chastising the knockout game, folks, and I did forget about that. And somebody asked when they were going to make a documentary on Newtown. Sacco did a little bit of research, and there actually already is a documentary underway.
Wow.
So, you know, that
I didn't know that.
Started, looks like they posted this little program here in June 11th, 2013. It's called the Newtown Documentary. You can find everything about it on YouTube if you want to watch the quick clip. So it was only a matter of time for somebody, not Michael Moore, who was going to make money off of a tragedy, but it was unbelievable.
Michael Moore.
Michael Moore. So I'm going to take a quick call before the break because we have James on the line who wants to jump in on what we're talking about right now, Tami, if that's okay with you.
Sure.
Okay, good, because if you said no, I was going to hang up on him. James, you're live in the air with Tactics Radio. Where are you calling from, James?
Yes, hi, I'm calling from Cleveland. I just wanted to comment. I saw that recent knockout video as well. I've seen a few of those knockout videos from that site, World Star Hip Hop, recently. And I find it outrageous that, you know, President Obama, I don't know if you guys remember, but in his first term, I think it was the first year he was in office, he actually had to sit down with a white man in I don't remember where the white man was, but I believe he had done something racially offensive, and then Obama invited him over for beers, and then they had a little sit down and beers. Yeah.
Cambridge, Massachusetts.
Yeah, you remember that, right?
Officer arrested a black college professor for disorderly conduct, and before the president even knew anything that was going on, he commented and called it stupid. Little did he know that police officer actually taught racial diversity. He'd worked inner city kids on duty and off duty nonstop, and one of the concerns that was going into that particular incident is, you know, a lot of people don't look at the entirety of it, is he said after the fact is, he said he lived there, but how do I know that he didn't have a restraining order? How do I know the wife didn't kick him out? How do I know the wife was in there beaten? His actions, he was shouldering the front door, and, you know, just because of where it happened, I happen to know people who know people and have a lot of inside information on that. You know, when they got there, they had an independent witness said, hey, there's two guys on the front porch. I just watched one of them shoulder the door open, and now there's something going on inside. Please show up. They go inside. They contact him. Ask the guy who ends up being a Harvard professor for ID, and he absolutely loses it. He eventually IDs and gives up his ID, and the cop kind of says, all right, well, fine, good, but here's why. He didn't want to hear it. The professor was just – and by the way, a professor is a personal friend of the president. Just keep that in mind.
Well, I also heard some other information about the professor because I now remember the case. I kind of forgot about it so long ago. But I also heard that professor was along. You remember the Reverend Obama had as well. Everyone was raising objections about him. Well, this professor of his was actually a similar line of thought as the Reverend.
Reverend Wright.
Yeah, he believed in black supremacist thought, from what I've understood. And I mean, I really think people are underestimating the racial tension that Obama's created with his presidency. And I think that we have to go back to Richard Nixon to find a president who stirred more controversy or has been a bigger disappointment. I mean...
Yeah. Well, and at least Richard Nixon had great foreign policy. So there's a lot of things about Richard Nixon that were really good, and especially when compared to someone like Barack Obama, to tell you the truth.
I mean, Richard Nixon created the thaw that led to our relations with China, and I don't see Obama creating any thaws anywhere. I see him just dividing people.
Well, when he goes overseas, it's to apologize for America. It's not to advance our foreign policy.
He never goes over to drop the hammer. He sends Biden over, which he just did this week in China with that whole air defense.
Send Biden to China now.
But yeah, no, we've called him the divider-in-chief for a long time. Rooster brought up a good point in the chat room. At least Nixon had the decency to resign. Obama will never do that. He thinks too highly of himself.
Exactly, and Nixon wasn't in charge of the NSA, so, I mean, Nixon didn't have the NSA spying on every single citizen, no matter what they're doing.
Or the IRS acting as the muscle.
This podcast is sponsored by Talkspace. You know when you're really stressed or not feeling so great about your life or about yourself? Talking to someone who understands can really help. But who is that person? How do you find them? Where do you even start? Talkspace. Talkspace makes it easy to get the support you need. With Talkspace, you can go online, answer a few questions about your preferences, and be matched with a therapist. And because you'll meet your therapist online, you don't have to take time off work or arrange childcare. You'll meet on your schedule, wherever you feel most at ease. If you're depressed, stressed, struggling with a relationship, or if you want some counseling for you and your partner, or just need a little extra one-on-one support, Talkspace is here for you. Plus, Talkspace works with most major insurers, and most insured members have a $0 copay. No insurance? No problem. Now get $80 off of your first month with promo code SPACE80 when you go to Talkspace.com. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com. Save $80 with code SPACE80 at Talkspace.com.
For the government?
Or Homeland Security, or INS, or the ATF, or the Justice Department, or the DSS. We could keep going. James, thanks for the call. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. All right, thanks.
Good, James.
All right, thanks a lot, guys. Take care.
All right. So, yeah, no, it is amazing. I do believe that he's the divider-in-chief. I believe that he, either intentionally or not, causes division, and doesn't do much to correct it when it does happen. I watched in horror as they did the beer summit, because what I said is you just gave credence to something you know nothing about. You just gave credence to this Louis Gates.
Yeah, he stuck his big mouth in when he didn't know anything.
At all.
It was one big misstep.
And you know, I know a couple people that know that particular police sergeant. And
I know you do.
They said, you know, what was he supposed to do? Say, no, I'm not going to go drink beer with the president? His department would have lambasted him.
Then Joe Biden invited himself. I don't think he was invited. He just showed up, which was hysterical. I heard some beer and peanuts on the South Lawn.
Joe Biden is like the uncle that will not leave at the end of the party. I really mean that. It just continues to go on and on and on.
But when he does leave, he goes to find chicks that ride hogs, right?
Yeah, and then nuzzles up against him.
Yeah.
Which kills me because indifferent, Joe, your wife was 10 times more attractive than that motorcycle woman. So if you are going to nuzzle in somebody's ear, at least trade up. You know, if you're going to be a public jackass, at least look like you're a public jackass with good taste. Don't just be a public jackass with anything. Jeremy, we're going to take a break. Phone number tonight is 347-205-9399. You have Rooster on hold. I got to take the break. I'll grab him the first time. Osaka's yelling at me because he knows Rooster's going to lay into him the next time. I'll take him on the other side of the commercial. I promise. 347-205-9399. It's the Sackheads Radio Show. I know, Rooster. I'm sorry.
Hello, I'm Lori, a student at Hillsdale College. Here is Hillsdale President Dr. Larry Arnn on how the founders viewed God as the source of our equality and legal rights.
America's founders knew, obviously, that human beings are not equal in terms of strength or beauty, or in terms of intelligence, industry, or talents. They understood that because of such differences in talents and things like that, some people would be wealthier than others. But human beings are equal, the founders believe, in their possession of natural rights, such as the rights to life, liberty, and property, Today, many Americans reject this equality of rights in order to pursue equality of condition through redistribution, or spreading the wealth around, to use a famous formulation. This is destructive of liberty as the founders understood it.
This Constitution Minute was brought to you by Hillsdale College. To join the national conversation on the Constitution, go to constitutionminute.org.
Hey guys, it's Shaun from Sackheads Radio. I know I've said it before. Check out our friends at conservativeoutcry.net, but I really mean it. If you want interesting and exciting political commentary and analysis, that is the place to get it. Different, always spot on, always truthful, never pulling a punch. conservativeoutcry.net. Tell Rooster to get Bulldog back on and that Sackheads Radio sent you. And also, coming soon, the Sackheads Radio Forum on conservativeoutcry.net.
How you doing? John Grant here. When I'm not slaving over a hot microphone on the 405radio.com Saturdays at 10 a.m. Eastern, I check out Shaun and Clint here at Sackheads Radio. We all appreciate the best political bloggers, writers, and commentators. We either get them on our shows or we make fun of them, as it should be. So check us out live Saturdays at 10 a.m. Eastern or forever on the podcasts on the 405radio.com.
Hi, this is Sarah Marie Brenner. You know, we often talk on the Brenner Brief about the fact that there really needs to be an organization to help people at the local level who are interested in running for things like school boards, city council, and other local offices. Well, I think I finally have the solution for you, at least for you women out there. It's called Politigal Network, Politigal Network.com. Their website's going to be launching mid-August, but they're already on Twitter at PoliticalUSA. I encourage you to follow them and become a member. Their goal is to be the #1 resource for conservative women. So if you love freedom, liberty, the United States of America, and politics, check out PoliticalNetwork.com or Twitter at PoliticalUSA.
Now back to Clint and Shaun on Sackheads Radio, radiating elegancy and quality.
And the amazing Tamara Jackson's co-hosting the show this evening, 347-205-9399. I am Sackhead Shaun on the board tonight, Sackhead Sacco. He's also answering the phones, and I apologize to my next guest on the phone that Jessica is not here answering the phones, because I really think that's the only reason he calls is to talk to her. My good friend Rooster from conservativeoutcry.net joined us. Rooster, I did not want to cut you short. I wanted you to get your time, sir. So what did you want to add to the conversation?
I just wanted to say hello to you and Tami.
Hi, Rooster.
Did you just lead my call screener, Rooster, by thinking it was something like that had to be said immediately before we went to the break?
No, I told your call screener, Sacco, I hope I don't get him in trouble, that when you go into the Obamacare discussion, that I had something to add. I didn't say immediately. I've been away for a while.
I know when we go to, but how did you know we were going into Obamacare? Hold on, Sacco and I have to have a discussion.
No, you said it, Shaun.
Specify that. I said we will talk about it, but I didn't think right now.
No, you said after the break we're going to talk about Obamacare and Medicaid and all of that. And I took that as a cue to call in.
Wait, where's my note? Hold on. Where's my note from Sacco that said, wait, give me your notebook right now. I'm going to read exactly what he wrote, where I thought it was germane to our last conversation.
Now leave the Germans out of this.
Here, this is what I get from my my note in the call screen, so I know who's online. Rooster-Obama. I assumed it was germane to the divisiveness conversation we were having in the last segment in James's phone call.
Well, Obama covers a multitude of people. It could be a lot of different things there.
Sacco,
you know what?
What?
This would. Let me put this. How apt is that, as Jamie Foxx would say? In fact, I'm working on that. As you guys know, I'm going back on the radio.
This podcast is sponsored by Talkspace. You know when you're really stressed or not feeling so great about your life or about yourself? Talking to someone who understands can really help. But who is that person? How do you find them? Where do you even start? Talkspace. Talkspace makes it easy to get the support you need. With Talkspace, you can go online, answer a few questions about your preferences, and be matched with a therapist. And because you'll meet your therapist online, you don't have to take time off work or arrange childcare. You'll meet on your schedule, wherever you feel most at ease. If you're depressed, stressed, struggling with a relationship, or if you want some counseling for you and your partner, or just need a little extra one-on-one support, Talkspace is here for you. Plus, Talkspace works with most major insurers, and most insured members have a $0 copay. No insurance? No problem. Now get $80 off of your first month with promo code SPACE80 when you go to Talkspace.com. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com. Save $80 with code SPACE80 at Talkspace.com.
I think
know.
I told you that, Shaun.
You know,
I've decided I've learned from my past mistakes, and that I just have to be me. And before I was trying to be somebody else. Hence the name Evil Rooster.
Who were you
because,
trying to be?
I don't know. It was new to me, and I do so much better when I call into this show, and I don't know why. I am looking for a co-host. I was going to ask Ken.
I think you and Ken would be absolutely informative. I think you guys would really cover a lot of great topics, but that would be a show full of comedy like no other. Because the two of you, and if you don't read Rooster's page, you're out of your mind. Right? Whether you agree or disagree, it's ridiculously well written. It's ridiculously well researched. Rooster is one of our oldest friends on the show. We love him to death. However, the two of them have such an amazing sense of humor that I suspect that it would be like a 10-minute segment of topics and then 15 minutes of joking and nonstop hilarity. And then back to good topics again. And I think Ken would be a great co-host for you, Rooster. I thought you did well the first time. And like you said, I think it's a matter of finding your feet, and that's why we did the way we did it with the podcast first for a long time to try to figure it out. But I'm glad you're coming back. I enjoyed your show, and I'm looking forward to have it come back.
Well, I'll send the link out, and I think you guys will find it better next time. Tami, the Evil Rooster moniker, I don't know if you read my last piece. I gave you a warning that some of the language might not be acceptable. I write a bit differently than you do, as you know.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things, too, that, and I really enjoy this with our little conservative group that we have here, is the variation. You have Tami, who is extremely intelligent, well-written, spoken, sweet, kind, and polite. Then you have us, and we like to be like a pit bull, if you will, of conservative politics. And that's kind of what we go, is just, never give up, never let up. Huh?
With an accent.
With an accent. And Rooster, and I love that, the tagline on his webpage is just an old man lamenting about the destruction of his nation. And if you read his articles, I think that comes out in a lot of what he writes. And we always joke about his age, but it's very direct and honest. And a lot of people in this day and age, and I'm linking it in the chat room for everyone who's on the chat room, a lot of people in this day and age don't necessarily appreciate that. Some on the right as well.
Many on the right.
Yeah, where, and we get pretty direct on the show as well, and usually when Rooster's on, we get even more direct. But it needs to be said, I think, a lot of times. And, the Conservative Party has this tendency to be so polite that we're afraid to say what needs to be said. And I think that's where a little bit of the libertarians and the pendulets in the world and art-style conservatism needs to come out a little bit more. And you have that intelligent discussion, but you also call them out on their BS, and you call it what it is.
Yeah.
Because when you start dodging that, but they don't. See, and that's the amazing part. As we saw with Martin Bashir, who, poor him, he lost his, he resigned from his job, but that was all done by design.
Yeah, he should have been canned immediately. I don't care if it was MSNBC and their pool of losers there. He should have been canned.
I agree with you.
They got caught on the carpet, and they couldn't take the heat anymore. That's why they did it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what, and they, as well as I do, that conversation was, hey, we're going to let you resign.
Yeah.
Just firing you, but you got to go. But he should.
And the article that the link you just posted on the chat room was, I told you that was actually an older piece that I originally wrote. I reworked it, but I originally wrote that to Diane Diamond.
Oh, really?
And it was a comment that I made to her after she lambasted our friend Andrea Kay one day, and I just went after her and her friends. But the whole gist of the article is the Republican Party or conservatives, whatever you want to call them nowadays. I'm not sure which is which anymore. If they don't start calling these people out and playing the game that's being played, they're going to continue to lose.
Yeah. I think one of the problems with Mitt Romney, and everybody knows me, that he was not my first choice. There were other people I would have preferred, but he was what we were left with, and he was a decent guy and a great businessman, and he would have understood what to do to help this nation economically. He loved America. There were a number of good things about him, and I believe he would have been truthful and a good leader, but he didn't know how to fight. And I thought, man, we need somebody that has the goodness and the sense and the economics in them, but they also know how to push back, to call BS BS, to really put up a good fight. And we haven't had that for a long time.
Well, and you know what? Topic, while I have the two of you on the line, I'll ask you right now, coming up 2016, who do you think could be that person for conservatives? And not, we're almost jumping ahead 2 segments because I want to talk about the GOP and amnesty. But
we're going to be done an hour and 10 minutes early.
Yeah, we're almost done now. Who am I kidding? I am running out of topics fast. No, 2016, who is that person? Who is that person that's going to be able to be intelligent, well-spoken, smart, however, edgy enough where they're not going to let up against these frivolous and ridiculous attacks? And look at Mitt Romney did a decent job during some of the debates, but there are times that I wanted him to kind of do what Paul Ryan did in the VP debates and just be like, no, you know what? You're not getting away. And he did it a little bit, but I wanted to be more direct. Yeah. You're not going to get away with that bold lie. That is a lie, Mr. President, whether you like it or not. It is not a fact, and you will not be allowed to say that here.
He needed a mind meld with one of you fighting Irish.
Well, that could be either Rooster or I in that regard.
Yeah.
But I agree. They need somebody. So that being said,
if I could take a person and do something like a combination of a Trey Gowdy and a Ted Cruz, I would be pretty happy. I don't know that Ted Cruz has the experience yet to step into that executive role.
Right.
But I like what I've seen out of Ted Cruz, and I love Trey Gowdy, and so I'm looking for somebody that's got some of those great qualities.
I agree with you on both. I absolutely love Trey Gowdy. The more I watch that man talk, the more I appreciate him.
Yep.
Again, he's one of those guys, I don't agree with every single word that comes out of his mouth, but I agree with his passion. I believe he's one of those leaders that is principled and does it because the right thing to do, not because some lobbyist wanted him to do X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, and he's not afraid to be fired up. We need somebody that can get fired up, whether it's about wrongs or rights.
Yeah, well, and
we need that.
We are such a nation of, mellow yellow, if we will, right now. Even this president, and I disagree with him completely ideologically, but even when he gets mad, he's not that same passionate person that he was when he ran, and you never see that come out. And I think
he's bored with the job.
Oh,
he likes the power. He doesn't like the position.
So Talk Radio 200 says on Twitter he'd like to see New Mexico Governor Susana Martinez. That's an interesting one.
Yeah, she's a spunky gal.
She is a spunky gal indeed. I'd like to see Tami J.
Can you imagine?
Roosters. I think that would be amazing. All 5'2" of you standing up against you against Hillary. I'd take you any day.
I wouldn't back down. This is the thing. I'm a little gal, but my dad taught me from the time I was little how to defend myself. So I've never been afraid of anything.
Size. Anyone who knows anything about any sort of fighting will tell you that size is never a factor. You could take somebody that's 160 pounds that knows how to fight and put them up against somebody who's 300 that doesn't, and they're all done.
And a lot of it's mental.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So
I thought
if you have
size
the right
mattered.
mental.
No, we're talking about fighting, Rooster.
Oh, okay.
Hey, Rooster, who would you see? Who would you like to see the conservatives, and not necessarily the Republicans, but conservatives throw up there in 2016 that could actually maybe take a shot?
Well, you know who I absolutely love is Sarah Palin, but I don't think she's got a shot.
I don't think she wants the shot.
I don't think so either. I think she likes to play kingmaker.
I love her as well.
I agree with you. I think that she's a great picker. Everyone she picks wins. But I also think that she kind of wants to let the GOP twist in the wind a little bit. Listen, if she jumped back into it, she would have a humongous following, and the GOP would turn around and really build their base again. However, I don't think she wants to give that power back to the old GOP. I almost wonder if she's not waiting for a party split like we've talked about a few times on the show. To kind of get away from that.
That's already occurred.
I mean a true party split. We talk about it. The Tea Party.
You're talking about a third party?
Third party. And I think if that happened,
I think a third party will destroy everything.
I think a third, and we've talked about this before, I think at some point a third party needs to happen, and even if we as conservatives take it on the chin for another election or two, I'm always looking long term, and that was one of the things that we've talked about a lot is, it may not be about our generation, and we may not see the exact change by the end of our generation, but if you're going to look long term for the nation, both parties, both the GOP and the Liberals, need to realize the direction that they're taking this nation is not acceptable. And if you get that third party in, and I truly believe this, Rooster, I know we've talked about this probably ad nauseum, I really think that if the Tea Party jumped out, and even if it wasn't the Tea Party, even if they wanted to call it the straight conservative party, what have you, if they jumped away and separated and started doing their own thing and split that Republican vote, but turned around to the old GOP and said, this is unacceptable, what you're doing, you aren't representing our values, Greg Phillips and jump vote, we've talked about this a bunch too, I think that you'll see a lot of old blue dog style Democrats start to walk away from the Democrat Party, who's the party of progressive liberals, which are just socialists, which a lot of old blue dog Democrats are not for that.
Yeah,
well, they're already
I
starting to do that.
There's any blue dogs left, yeah.
I think they're out there. I just think that right now they're so afraid to speak up because, listen, look at how the GOP treats their own people who they don't agree with. They land-base them and destroy them. Look at how liberals, look at the Harry Reids and what they do to those that dare speak against him. It's almost like the emperor, dragging out the person in front of him and humiliating him in front of the kingdom. How dare you speak against me, young man? How dare you say that this is unacceptable? You will you will eat it and you will enjoy it and you'll shut your mouth. And I think that there are some Democrats out there, and like Rooster just chimed in a little bit, that are starting to pop out that will say that aren't necessarily going to line and file like they expect to. I hope so. I really would like to see some old traditional Democrats start to pop up and separate away from this horrendous progressive liberal Democrat Party that's there now, because it needs to happen. And people who are a little bit more center liberals need to realize that they don't have to go away the progressives. There might be another opportunity. And I think it would restore a lot of balance back into the politics in this country.
I guess if I had to give you a name right now who I'd support, it probably would be Scott Walker.
I have no problem with that.
Scott Walker's a good man.
Yeah, I like Scott Walker a lot,
think, and I think it's got to come from the states. It's going to have to be a governor.
Yeah, no, I agree with Clint and I got into this a couple months ago. We were talking about, does it have to be a governor? And he's kind of under the impression, like you are, saying, hey, he's going to have that executive leadership. And
yeah.
I'm one of those people that says, I agree to a point, but I also don't think that you look over a good candidate that has maybe a small business leadership experience, that's still that experience, the Herman Cains of the world and the people that have made something on it. You can't overlook if it's a good candidate. Now, I don't think you should just throw someone up there because. I think Scott Walker,
a guy like Walker will surround himself with guys like Herman Cain and good business people. But the thing that he brings to the table is he's already fought the left and he won.
Oh, yeah, and he won in a big way, and he won twice, if you will, in one election. And I think that says a lot. If I had to go out there, my first one would be Clint, even though he'd never run. I'm dead serious.
Do I still get to be Secretary of State?
Absolutely.
That's what I want.
I would love to have sent you to the Iran hearings in the last couple of weeks, Rooster. But Clint's personality, if I could find somebody, he'd never run because he's too smart for that. If I could find somebody with his knowledge, his personality, and his ability to convey his message far better than I can. I'm just a loudmouth idiot, and I'm the first one to admit it. That type of candidate, that type of person, he's not afraid to stand up. He is like Scott Walker. He's not afraid to stand up. He knows what he's talking about. He's not afraid to take on even his own party, and he will push forward and do what's right. And that's what we need is somebody of principle.
You got a lot of people out there that think that Christie is the same type of man, but I warned you about him a long time ago.
I'm not thrilled with Christie.
No, and you know what, Rooster? I think Rooster going on 2 years ago now warned us about Christie, and I have to give him credit where it's due, where he said he's just playing the game. He's just trying to align himself to get into the position, and you watch, he's going to go more center, if not even right.
You mean left?
Left. My apologies. Even more left, and that's come to fruition completely. And, it's sad to me that you see, even on a state level, how being a politician with that much power and that much attention, and listen, he did some good things fiscally, and he did take on the unions. People forget that. He took on the school teachers' unions and pretty much told them to go pound sand. He did some good things, and then once that happened and he got the notoriety, all of a sudden he said, oh, wait, I like this. I got to start going to the center. I need more people to love me, and that's what it's become, in my opinion. It's the whole love me, love me, love me thing.
He came out to Oregon, and I heard him speak and met him, and we talked for a bit, and I have a few pictures with him, and he was fantastic. And that was in the beginnings of his, I think just a few months after he was elected there, and had done some really good things with the unions. But he was really good. But a lot of things I've seen subsequently, I'm just not thrilled with him.
Yeah, well, it's like everything else. You spend enough time with the person, you start to see them real selves.
Yeah.
His real self has come out, and it's a shame because, I liked his fake self a lot better.
When he's hanging out with the president.
And that's fine. That's funny, is a lot of people gave him flack for that. If you did pull apart all the politics he's done since then, listen, if you are a governor of a state that has a tragedy, and you're able to work with the president and the federal government for recovery, and it doesn't matter if you can say, hey, it doesn't matter about party lines, we need to do the right thing for these people now, I can respect that actually more so than saying, well, I'm still not dealing with him just because he's a Democrat and I'm a Republican and I don't need his help. You need to realize as a natural leader or a leader of a state or anywhere else is that sometimes you need to reach out to the other side for help. And that doesn't mean you have to buy into the whole ideology, which unfortunately I think he has, and drink the Kool-Aid. But what it means is, I can communicate with the other side. And I think that's huge, is that ability to communicate with those you oppose, even if you don't like them, to accomplish something that needs to get done. And that's something that we do not see out of anybody in the left right now, from the president on down.
Got that right.
And it's amazing because I hate to say it, but the Democrats can learn something from one of their own. They can watch Chris Christie and see how to work with the other side. Wait, did I say Democrat? Sorry.
Hey guys, I don't want to hog your time. I'm going to throw something at you and then let you guys go and talk about it. But I know you're going to talk about Obamacare and something that I haven't heard discussed yet. I know that everybody's talking about how the rates are going up and people are getting shell shocked from the rates and nobody knew about it or they did know about it or whatever. But when you do your taxes this year, you'll note that what used to be anything over 7.5% in medical expenses was tax deductible. It's now 10.5%.
Did they really bump that through? I didn't know that.
Wow.
Yes, they did.
Well,
so you tell me, did they or did they not know? rates were going to go up.
They do.
Yeah.
Of course they knew. We knew back. We know now that in 2010 they knew rates were going to go up. And when we come back, I want to talk a little bit about Obamacare a little bit more in depth. But everything that's happening now, they knew was going to happen. Some things they try to Band-Aid, and other things that they try to smokescreen and shadow and sidestep, if you will. But they're not dumb. Whether you agree with them or not, that's something that we need to constantly remind ourselves is the left and progressives are not stupid. This is part of a long-term plan that they have very well in place, and they know what their agenda is, and they don't shy away from it. They're very slick in their tactics, and they're very tenacious about it. So I would say that they knew that was going to go up. And I get another little tidbit along those lines on the other side of the break about Obamacare. Rooster, thank you so much for calling in. I really appreciate it. Everyone check out conservativeoutcry.net. Our good friend Rooster is the writer, and you'll enjoy it. And if you don't,
read my latest, and I would like comments.
Absolutely.
Please. Good night.
Thanks,
and note, no F-bombs. I didn't even say a damn, a hell.
Hey.
I had the Google. I had the Google on. It was dirty to clean. You just put the word in, and then it comes back with a clean word.
There you go.
Hey, Rooster, I was about to put on the board. I was going to write the date down, but you still had to drop 2. I'm just kidding. Thank you so much for calling.
You said I could drop a tame one. Now, when my show airs, which is going to air this Saturday, the first one, Saturday at 11 o'clock, I will be dropping F-bombs more than likely.
I would expect nothing less. Thank you so much for calling, Rooster.
Because that will be hosted by Evil Rooster.
There we go.
Oh, it's like Bizarro Superman. Everyone check him out, Rooster at conservativeoutcry.net. Check out his show coming up this Saturday on Blog Talk Radio at 11 o'clock Eastern Time. Thanks, Rooster.
All right, night, guys.
Good night. Tami, we're up against the break. I can't believe we've gone through 2 segments already. And amazingly, we've barely covered anything I've wanted to. Isn't that awesome?
I know. And just when you start to cover what you want to, I get on my soapbox and I take you completely into some tangential direction, and you don't know what happened.
And that's why we love you. The phone number tonight, 347-205-9399, if you want to join the conversation. We will be back in 3 here on the Sackheads Radio Show.
Hey, if you care about what's going on in the world, you cannot afford to miss my show. Hi, this is Andrea Kaye, your host of The Andrea Kaye Show. It's not always about the money. Okay, it is always about the money, but it's also about politics, pop culture, and you. The only thing street about this show is the smarts. There's a reason they call me Dynamite in a Dress, and you'll find out why when you listen Tuesday mornings at 10 on Financial News and Talk.
Hello, I'm Paul, a student at Hillsdale College. Here is my professor, Dr. Larry Arnn, on the separation of church and state.
America's founders believed in the separation of church and state, in that the country was not to have an official religion or an official sect. But that did not mean that government was to be hostile to religion, or even indifferent to religion, as many today argue. In fact, America's founding document, the Declaration of Independence, includes both a reference to God as the author of the laws of nature and a confident assertion that human beings are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. Far from being hostile or indifferent to religion, America's founders understood the theology of the Declaration to be an essential part of the education of citizens.
This Constitution Minute was brought to you by Hillsdale College. To join the national conversation on the Constitution, go to constitutionminute.org.
How you doing? John Grant here. When I'm not slaving over a hot microphone on the 405radio.com Saturdays at 10 a.m. Eastern, I check out Shaun and Clint here at Sackheads Radio. We all appreciate the best political bloggers, writers, and commentators. We either get them on our shows or we make fun of them, as it should be. So check us out live Saturdays at 10 a.m. Eastern or forever on the podcasts on the 405radio.com.
3, 2, 1.
Hey, this is Head Clint. I want to take this opportunity to thank all the wingnut leaders throughout the world to give our men and women of the armed forces a job, as well as all the anarchists, terrorists, and Occupy folks that give our men and women in uniform on the home front, firefighters, law enforcement personnel, and first responders, job security here in the States as well. So thank all you wingnuts out there. This is Head Clint saying have a good day.
Now back to Clint and Shaun on Sackheads Radio, radiating elegancy and quality.
Nothing like cutting it close. Part 3 of the Sackheads Radio Show, 347-205-9399. I am joined... Really? Sacco, really?
You have to almost stutter there.
Oh. You see what I have to go through, Tami? This is ridiculous. When the sound production...
Sacco loves you.
Well, you know... I swear it's like Clint tells him, hey, I'm not going to be there this week, so make sure you give him as much hell as humanly possible while he's on the air. And really try to get him twisted up, because if I'm not there, somebody's got to do it, and Tammy's too nice to do it. I think that's part of the plan now.
Oh.
So I want to talk a little bit about Obamacare, and this is something I have a really close friend of mine, I'll call him Scott, who is a healthcare attorney, and he's been following Obamacare like a hawk because it directly affects his line of work, and he's also a conservative, and he is completely disgusted by what it's done to our country and where it's going to go. A lot of the stuff that we're starting to see come out now, he warned me about eons ago, like from the moment it passed. So one of the things is how they're trying to get around this debacle with the website, and the way they're doing it essentially is sending everyone over to Medicaid, and they're by direction, most with the exception of a few states, most of them are being told essentially to do what's called a flat file application, and I believe I have that term correctly. And essentially what it does is it eliminates all of the real information that you need in order to file. In other words, you don't necessarily have to prove your income. You don't have to prove your situation. You just need very basic information. You give an estimate on what you make. You don't have to show proof. And eventually, allegedly, they're going to go to the information hub and look it all up and check it. But there's no time constraint on when that happens, and there's no deadline on when that's going to happen. So you look at Medicaid right now, and I forget what the last numbers were, but it's going through the roof with Medicare signups. And now the president and his administration has sent this directive out to keep the overload off the Obamacare signups to push people over to Medicaid. And it's once again the president turning around and essentially telling people to sidestep the law that he passed and signed in order to make himself look better and make the program look like less of a failure. Are you shocked at this point?
Oh, am I shocked? No, not at all. Not by anything that Obama does these days, because we've seen it all. And it's interesting that I know that on the front cosmetic end, it looks like maybe the healthcare.gov site is working a bit, but on the back end, nothing is working, so nobody can pay. The insurance companies that they're supposedly signing up for when they put their policy in their basket that they want, those companies are not getting their information, or they're getting someone else's information. It's crisscrossing. Just a number of foobar things going on there, and that's just really cosmetics. That's not even the insurance itself. Plus, we know that doctors are deciding to go into early retirement. One of my doctors, I just got a letter from him this week, and he's going into early retirement. Also, I think you guys know that I was one of the people that my insurance was canceled, and then after the president said, well, I think maybe we should extend it for a year. Of course, that will go through 2014 and the 2014 elections. No, I'm sure that's just a coincidence. But the Oregon Insurance Division decided that, well, okay, we will allow companies to extend your insurance. So first it was canceled, and I could take a new policy if I wanted to go 250 to 300%, up to 1,000% for these new policies, depending on if I chose the bronze on up. Then I received another letter saying, just kidding, we've decided in Oregon to extend your policy.
There's nothing better on your own health care to get just kidding.
Yes. Well, and then I'm hearing from everyone, well, it wasn't even constitutional. Of course it wasn't. For the president to say it can be extended, it wasn't constitutional. I'm sorry, John Roberts. I like Chief Justice Roberts, but I think he was wrong. This is not a tax. We cannot be compelled to buy something. And it just infuriates me from the get-go. But, you know, the whole thing is unconstitutional. And so now I'm wondering, am I going to get another letter from Regents Blue Cross that says, well, we've rethought it, and we're not going to extend things because it's not constitutional. So once again, you're canceled. I don't know what's going to happen.
Well, it's amazing. And, you know, part of the thing, if you really read through the 1,200 pages of BS, and I think another 300 or so have been added to it since the inception of this law, so much of it just says at the discretion of the Secretary of the Health and Human Services, which all that is so, yeah, if the president calls the secretary in this point, it's Sebelius, and says, ooh, we need to change this for the time being, the secretary turns around and goes, oh, well, yeah, this is at my discretion, and we have to adjust this. This Medicaid thing is the exact example of executive power that is just absolutely insane.
Well, and this is the Sebelius that doesn't work for us, remember? So she doesn't have to be accountable to us. She doesn't work for us.
I know. It's amazing. If you get a paycheck from any state, local, federal, county, you work for the people. Now, I'm not one of those people that says, hey, I pay my taxes, you work for me per se. But in this situation, well,
they do work for us.
They do work for us. And no, I agree with that. But I don't throw it out there like that as just that, you know, I try to be reasonable that if you work for the Department of Sanitation, I'm not going to go out and say, hey, you have to take the trash from inside my house. You work for me. You know what I mean? I'm realistic in my expectations.
But there does need to be some accountability.
Absolutely.
What they do.
Absolutely. And this Medicaid thing, and it's going under the radar. You know, I was researching, when Scott told me about it today, I was researching flat file Medicaid. It took me a while to really kind of pull up what I was looking for, and I found the directive letter, and I'm trying to see if I can post it in the chat. If I can find it again, I will. But it's really kind of scary when it says, oh, all you really need is the person's basic information, name, date of birth, social security number, where they live, what their projected income is. You don't need proof of it. And then there's like one or two other basic requirements. And you send them in, get them on Medicaid, and eventually we'll go and research really what they make and put them on the right program. How can you tell me, or how can this administration say everything's working out, everything's going great, we're fixing the website, when you're releasing the directive this week that explains to people how to sidestep the Obamacare exchanges and go right into Medicaid? It is an absolute atrocity that he is sidestepping his own law. This was his flagship law of what he was going to pass.
Legacy.
He was going to be. Hey, listen, he had that supermajority. He could have just turned around and he could have fixed the economy. He could have done so much more. He could have helped Detroit out and the rest of us. But he jammed us down our throats, and then now he's giving directives on how to get around it. And the Senate word came out today that Harry Reid is telling his own people that they can keep their own insurance if they choose to do so and not go on Medicaid. I'm sorry, on Obamacare. It's insane how just ridiculous this whole debacle is. And then when he comes out, I think it was either today or yesterday, and says, we're not repealing Obamacare no matter what, blah, 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 and they're Republicans.
Yeah, it's kind of like, don't mess with me.
Yeah, that's exactly what I thought is how, you know, it's almost that dear peasant, how dare you approach me? You cannot hunt in my woods. You do what you're told and be thankful that I allow you to think on your own.
Well, what's interesting, Shaun, is that where they are right now with the website even is where they should have been. Were they a private company? Were they an Amazon or an Apple or something like that? They would have been at this point several months prior to a rollout where, okay, we've got these modules functioning well. Now we go to the next module, and then we've got to incorporate the pay module and the data transfer module. That this is where they should have been about 3+ months prior to the rollout. Were they a well-oiled machine of a private enterprise? Instead, the government went ahead with the rollout, and Obama knew, everybody in his administration knew they were not prepared. I heard today that they've signed up something like 29,000 people.
Yeah.
29,000.
Remember December 1st was his, no, we're going to be on track by December 1st.
Yeah, and they're saying it's much better now. Plus, I don't know if you saw the link I put up in the chat room about an article I did that's kind of taken off a little bit. Sinister source code in the Obamacare program. I was really interested when I saw this because nobody's talked about it a whole lot. And, of course, mainstream media won't talk about it. As we know, they won't talk about anything that exposes this president. But it's interesting in the source code. And this is something that interested me because as a writer and editor, I deal a lot in HTML code and other source code. But there is a line in the source code that says you have no reasonable expectation of privacy regarding any communication or data transiting or stored on this information system. Now, the user does not see that source code, but it's there. And they had some hearings, as they've been having a lot of them lately, and somebody from CGI, the company who's, yep person, went to Princeton with Michelle Obama, which is why they got this no-bid contract.
No bid. I love it. No bid.
No bid. And Rep. Barton from, I think, is he from Texas? Yeah, he's from Texas. He's a Republican. Representative Joe Barton was asking her, and he said, how in the world can this be HIPAA compliant? And that's interesting because I believe it was Clinton that signed HIPAA into law. So the Clintons ought to be real PO'd about this whole deal. But he said, how can this be HIPAA compliant? HIPAA is designed to protect the patient's privacy, and this explicitly says in order to continue, you have to accept this condition that you have no privacy or no reasonable expectation of privacy.
Well, yeah,
now,
it's the government.
Yeah, and when I put this up, 99% of the comments, and I've got 100 and some comments right now, and it's growing, were how dare they, this is Marxism and over the top. Now, there's one guy in the midst of all those that said, what's the big deal? I'm from a country, I'm assuming this person's probably from Canada, where the government knows everything and they take care of us, and it makes much more sense for those people that know what they're doing in government to make health decisions for people. And my mouth was open. And he said, who cares if they know a few details about you? And he said it's not like they would know inside health info. I thought, you know what?
That's exactly what they know.
They know that, and if they know my address, and I don't want them to know if that's too much information.
Absolutely. It's almost like the sheep standing in line at the slaughter going, I don't care if they read my ID tag first.
Yeah, and I just, so I had to answer that one guy. I was going through all the comments, looking at him. I saw his, and I started out, and I said, I'm sorry, sir, but your reply, your comment here is breathtaking, and let me tell you why. And so I was very respectful, but I gave him what for. I said, this is ludicrous. Our government, we are not a Marxist dictatorship. We are not a socialist government. We are a republic. We're supposed to be a republic of law-abiding, rugged individuals that take care of ourselves and take care of our own. And the government's it's supposed to be there for national defense, a little bit of infrastructure, and not a heck of a lot else. Thank you very much.
Yeah, well, that's the problem is a lot of people don't agree with that, and they don't even understand it. They don't understand the way our country was set up. I always tell people, would you want? It's the equivalent of an IRS agent. And I used this example when I was explaining it to a female friend the other day. Do you want an IRS agent walking in the room while you're a gynecologist and looking over his shoulder?
I barely want the gynecologist there when I'm
exactly right. So what they're doing?
Okay. Since we're getting too serious here, I have to tell you something. Early on, when I was young, and this is crazy, Shaun, because as a girl from a conservative family and a family of faith, you know, you're told what to do and what not to do, and God's watching you, kiddo, and you know what? You save yourself till you're married and you keep your legs together and you do all this kind of stuff, and then suddenly you have to go to college, so you have to have a full physical, and you go in there, and a guy with a miner's hat and a headlight on suddenly is telling you to relax and drop your drawers, and they're going to go on an expedition, and it just about gives older teenage gals heart attacks if they really were raised right.
I'm so glad.
And I still remember this first exam, which is just, that's how much it makes an impression on you, because it was an emotional experience, not one I treasure. And I was just, I thought I was going to absolutely die. I knew that I wouldn't have to worry about college or anything because I would be dead, after this exam. And on the ceiling, there was a picture of a woman standing straight up in these stirrups, and the doctor is saying, "I told you, Mrs. So-and-so, to relax." And that's what I felt like. But anyway, every time I hear the word gynecologist, I think of that. And women, we all talk about this. Men don't have to go through this until they get to a certain age.
Lucky.
Prostate stuff.
And even then, you're knocked out most of the time.
I know. But, women, the
closest thing I can relate to is, I'd had the same doctor for years, and it was a guy. And I can remember I was about 22, and I had to go in for a physical. My doctor took a year off to do.
How dare he?
I know, right? And he didn't check with me first. He probably told me, and I was 22 and just didn't pay attention. But he was doing some sort of enhanced training. It was going to be, in school for a year to do blah, blah, blah. I think some sort of cardio. Exactly, and it was a female. And I just called, and they were like, well, Dr. Lim is going to be away for a year, but Dr. So-and-so is taking over for him. All right, fine, whatever. It's my yearly physical, blah, 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 blah.
You wish you'd been doing jazzercise for a year and been tanning?
No, not even that. I wish I could have crawled, because the look on my face when the door opened, and this wasn't at all sexist thought, but when the door opened and she walked in, I was like, okay, they must have got a new nurse. This isn't Dr. So-and-so, right? Because in my mind, she was probably no more than 5 years older than me. I mean, obviously she was probably 10 years just because of med school, but I had a heart attack. And, here I am, this 22-year-old tough guy, and, play sports, drink, blah, blah, ha, 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 I can rough and tumble with the best of them. And here comes this young gal who's fairly attractive, who's 10 times more intelligent than I'll ever be, open the door, and she just sees this. I must have turned 15 shades of purple. And that was the most uncomfortable I had been my entire life. And I think she knew it because she kept trying to use levity, which made it even worse because I couldn't laugh. So then it just seemed like I was...
How about the Red Sox?
Yeah, exactly. She was, thank goodness she didn't, try to make jokes about me, you take your sweater off now or something like that, Sweater's off. This isn't funny. Just hurry up. But it is scary.
But can you imagine women have to go through that their whole life?
No, I can't even begin to imagine it. I can't. That's just not even something I can walk down that road. Listen, I'm one of the biggest believers that, when it comes to childbirth, I'm like, yeah, no, I'm so glad women have to do that because, I don't care, the toughest guy in the world, if you ever said, all right, here's what's going to happen and explain that to them, they'd all go, no thanks, I'm out.
Or there'd be no more than one child per family.
Oh, no, as an existence, we would just end. Because guys in general would be like, yeah, I'm not having that. Off on a tangent again.
So I took you down a rabbit hole, didn't I? We got into some funny territory. I bet Clint doesn't talk about stuff like this too often.
Not on the air. But to go back, you now have this president who's issuing these directives on how to sidestep his own law, which is just disgusting enough. And then we get into the judicial hearings this week, and I have a clip that I'll play after the break. I'm not going to have enough time to play it before, where you have these 4 quote-unquote constitutional scholars, Jonathan Turley, I think it's Nicola Rosenkratz, Simon Lazarus, and Michael Cannon, answering questions.
I wonder where Guildenstern was.
Yeah. Answering questions to the Judiciary Committee, and the whole thing was about, is the executive branch becoming too powerful? Are we?
Yeah, presidential power in the Constitution.
Yeah.
It was excellent.
It was excellent because even, and I think it was Turley, who is a progressive himself and a liberal, and he has his own website that says it, had an amazing quote. This morning I will testify in Congress before the House Judiciary Committee on the presidential's constitutional duty to faithfully execute the law. The hearing will address where the President Obama has ordered the delay or non-enforcement of federal laws. While I happen to agree with some of these policies, I have great reservation about this record and its implications for the separation of powers. Now, here is a guy who has his own liberal think tank website. He's an uber progressive. His name's Jonathan Turley. He is a professor at George Washington University Law School. Really a guy that, in my opinion, shouldn't be shaping the minds of youth, but that's neither here nor there, who is turning around saying, no, I agree with this as an individual. Like, I don't think that they should enforce the immigration law and blah, 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 blah. However, what happens when this happens and it begins to blur the line on the separation of powers? When the executive branch can start saying, federal government, you ignore this law here, you ignore that law there, what does that happen when it comes to, say, constitutional rights? You know, we see with the NSA, there's a good chance a lot of it, under the Fourth Amendment at least, was ignored, and that the information, the data that they were collecting at random without just cause is just mind-boggling and scary is the only word that I can think of. But I think that's a huge insight into how out of control this administration has got with all these executive orders and executive privilege. And, you know, listen, you look at, I go back to Fast and the Furious when, what's his name over at the Justice Department, Eric Holder, was supposed to release certain documents to the committee, and he kept holding back documents, and they eventually held him in contempt, and the president goes, oh, no, executive privilege. He couldn't release these, and I don't have to tell you why. It's scary. And then, obviously, they hold him in contempt, and he pretty much chooses not to investigate and or charge himself. But the more this president's in office, the more this comes to mind.
Well, when the president does it, that means that it is not illegal.
Right? I mean, isn't that where we are right now? Is he pretty much is under this bizarre belief? And, you know, I know 2 weeks ago in San Francisco,
he thinks he's the emperor.
Yes. Well, he just thinks that, you know, Congress is like a group of fake people that exist just to kind of make his life difficult. It's almost like it's a smokescreen.
He's like, he's telling them, go away, you bother me.
Yeah. And when you have Charlie Rangel, what was it, last week, turn around and say, well, he should just do everything by executive order and sidestep Congress as much as possible.
And that's what Nancy Pelosi said she wished she could do.
Yeah. And I'm like, buddy.
He wants to do everything by fiat. Yeah. He believes he's omnipotent. And, those hearings were pretty informative, especially since all but one of the Democrats left. They thought it was no big deal, but everybody that was testifying pretty much said that the executive, they wouldn't say Obama, the executive does not have the right to do this or that, everything that he's doing right now, quite frankly. And a number of the people asking the questions said, what is the remedy for a rogue president?
Oh, yeah.
Are you calling Obama a rogue president? Let's just say a hypothetical rogue president. What's the remedy? Is it impeachment? Is it the vote? What is it?
And I have a clip, and why don't we do this? Because I want to get into this. I want to play this clip in its entirety. It's a long one. I didn't want to edit it because there's too much good stuff in it at once. Let's go on a break early, and I'm actually going to cut the last break a little short. I'll try to clip the commercial because I want to play this. So 347-205-9399. We'll try to get into phone calls for the last couple minutes of the show. We'll be back in, we'll call it 2 here on the Sackheads Radio Show.
Hey, if you care about what's going on in the world, you cannot afford to miss my show. Hi, this is Andrea Kaye, your host of The Andrea Kaye Show. It's not always about the money. Okay, it is always about the money, but it's also about politics, pop culture, and you. The only thing street about this show is the smarts. There's a reason they call me Dynamite in a Dress, and you'll find out why when you listen Tuesday mornings at 10 on Financial News and Talk.
Hello, I'm Paul, a student at Hillsdale College. Here is my professor, Dr. Larry Arnn, on the separation of church and state.
America's founders believed in the separation of church and state, in that the country was not to have an official religion or an official sect. But that did not mean that government was to be hostile to religion, or even indifferent to religion, as many today argue. In fact, America's founding document, the Declaration of Independence, includes both a reference to God as the author of the laws of nature and a confident assertion that human beings are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. Far from being hostile or indifferent to religion, America's founders understood the theology of the Declaration to be an essential part of the education of citizens.
This Constitution Minute was brought to you by Hillsdale College. To join the national conversation on the Constitution, go to constitutionminute.org.
How you doing? John Grant here. When I'm not slaving over a hot microphone on the 405radio.com Saturdays at 10 a.m. Eastern, I check out Shaun and Clint here at Sackheads Radio. We all appreciate the best political bloggers, writers, and commentators. We either get them on our shows or we make fun of them, as it should be. So check us out live Saturdays at 10 a.m. Eastern or forever on the podcasts on the 405radio.com.
Hey folks, it's Shaun from Sackheads Radio. As a native Bostonian, my heart broke on April 15, 2013, watching those horrendous attacks at the Boston Marathon. Now there's a way that you can help. Go to onefundboston.org, onefundboston.org, where you can donate to help the victims and families from this awful attack. Onefundboston.org, all the proceeds will go directly to the victim's family. Thank you very much from Sackheads Radio.
Hey, we're back here for the final part of the Sackheads Radio Show with Tamara Jackson. You know, Tami, you have me all spun up tonight. It was that last segment. I'm hiding under the desk right now. Before we went to break, we're talking about the judiciary hearings today in the four that testified in front of it. Jonathan Turley, Nicholas Rosenkatz, Simon Lazarus, Michael Cannon. They stacked it with two conservatives and two progressive liberals for the most part, but they're all constitutional scholars. Here's this 8-minute exchange between Representative Scott and the four of them, and this is a pretty interesting chain of questions. Just listen.
And I'm curious as to what you think the limited powers of the president might be, given you grant him such latitude to amend Obamacare, extend the statutory deadline because it conforms with the broader intent of the law, and your reference to the intent of Congress that they really intended to allow for the application of taxes and the distribution of refundable tax credits, even though Mr. Cannon testifies that that's not in the section that applies. So from a broader perspective, could you tell me how you think the president's powers are limited? And I maybe just ask, does he have the power to lay and collect taxes?
Well, first of all, I think that the president's powers are limited by what the statute provides. And I think I've said several times, I agree entirely that the President cannot simply refuse to apply or enforce a law for policy reasons.
But can he regulate commerce, for example?
The President is obligated to phase in a new law.
I'm sorry, Mr. Lett, I hear that, but I'm trying to get to the constitutional limitations that you think the President has. Let me just bypass the enumerated powers with the exception of, what would happen? I'm concerned about Mr. Turley's statement that we get into a pretty dangerous area here if we don't have constitutional limitations. What if we just leap to the end of this thing? What if the President declared war? What if he assumed that authority? What is the recourse then? What would your counsel be to this Congress if we objected to such a thing, or even if we objected to it on purely constitutional grounds and we thought it was a good policy decision and he vetoed our resolution to declare war? That should get us to the bottom of this discussion.
Well, the President doesn't have the authority under the Constitution to
declare
war. The Congress does. The Congress has not been enormously eager to exercise that authority in my lifetime. But that's a very complicated subject, and it's a subject of interplay between Congress and the executive branch. There is a War Powers Act. There are disputes about how.
Let me then pick it up from there. That I'm illustrating this point that if there's an incremental march down through as a president overreaching his constitutional authority, in my opinion, I think the opinion of many people on this committee in this room, he could assume among that any of the enumerated powers and the recourse that Congress would have, all the way down to the declaration of war, and the recourse that Congress would have would be pass a resolution of disapproval, or we could shut off the funding through the power of the purse. And the President's already assumed the power of the purse, and so the next recourse is go to the courts, and if we find out that the courts do not grant standing for members of Congress, then the next recourse is, I think as Mr. Rosencrantz said, the word that we don't like to say in this committee, and I'm not about to utter here in this particular hearing, the balance I want to come to is ask Mr. Cannon this question. The frustration of this balance of powers because of the disrespect for the various branches, the competing branches of government that come, and I'll argue that the Founding Fathers envisioned that each branch of government would jealously protect its constitutional power and authority, and that static balance that would be there would be the definition of a brighter line between the three articles of the Constitution. But what's your suggestion on what then finally resolves this? I know we said elections. If the elections are affected by decisions of the executive branch, what do the people do who are the final arbiters of this definition of the Constitution if they're even frustrated by the election?
Is this to me or
I'm asking Mr. Cannon, please.
I think it was to me, and you're asking if there's no judicial remedy and there's no electoral remedy, what do the people do? To what particular sort of abuses are you?
Any one of the list of the enumerated powers, for example, ending with the declaration of war, because that's the starkest of all.
There is a procedure in the Constitution that allows the people to amend the Constitution without going through Congress. That is another method where the people can try to restrain the executive.
Let me suggest then, if that should happen, why would an executive with such disrespect for the Constitution today honor an amended Constitution from a constitutional convention?
That is an excellent question.
I think I'd like to turn to Mr. Turley and ask him if he's had a chance to reflect upon that earlier statement of the situation that we are in and where this goes. We need to look into this future, and I'd ask that unanimous consent for that additional minute to ask each of the witnesses to tell us what's America look like in the next 25 years if we have executive upon executive that builds upon this continual stretching or disregard of the constitutional restraints and the disrespect for Article 1. I start with Mr. Turley.
You may answer the question as quickly as you can.
Okay. I really have great trepidation of where we are heading because we are creating a new system here, something that is not what was designed. We have this rising fourth branch in a system that's tripartite. The center of gravity is shifting, and that makes it unstable. And within that system, you have the rise of an uber presidency. There could be no greater danger for individual liberty. And I really think that the framers would be horrified by that shift because everything they dedicated themselves to was creating this orbital balance, and we've lost it.
As I've said before, I think the ultimate check is elections, but I don't think you should be hesitant to speak the word in this room. A check on executive lawlessness is impeachment, and if you find that the president is willfully and repeatedly violating the Constitution, if on your hypothetical he were to declare war, I would think that would be a clear case for impeachment.
Well, I guess this is the first time I've heard anyone complain about the possibility that this president is going to unilaterally declare war and be over-aggressive about that. I don't really think that's a
hypothetical answer the question.
Much of a description of his foreign policy. But Congress has lots of power if it chooses to use it. The power of the purse is an enormous power. I think that if I were you, I'd find ways to influence policy using the Congress's powers, which you're not doing. I mean, for example, we're hearing complaints about the president's actions to not enforce deportation against certain classes of immigrants. Instead of complaining about that, this committee could hold a markup and report out a comprehensive immigration reform bill, send it to the floor.
Mr. Lazarus, you are, not you, but the questioner's 2.5 minutes over, so if you can dispense with giving us advice on what our legislative agenda should look like and answer the question, I'd be grateful to you.
Okay. Well,
Thanks, Trey.
That is an answer. I think that Congress has a lot of power and it can use it.
Okay. And I assume that the failure to exercise is also an exercise of power, the failure to act. Mr. Cannon, would you like to briefly answer?
Maybe Mr. Lazarus knows better than I do how many bombs the president has to drop without congressional authorization before that becomes war. I don't know the actual number. But I think what Mr. King was getting at is, there is one last thing to which the people can resort if the government does not respect the restraints that the Constitution places on the government. Abraham Lincoln talked about our right to alter our government or a revolutionary right to overthrow it. And that is certainly something that no one wants to contemplate. But as I mentioned in my written and my delivered testimony, if the people come to believe that the government is no longer constrained by the laws, and they will conclude that neither are they. That is why this is a very, very dangerous sort of thing for the president to do, to wantonly ignore the laws, to try to impose obligations on people that the legislature did not approve.
An excellent conclusion. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield.
Okay, that was a lot of information in 8 minutes, and I understand that. First of all, and I think
the hearings went on a lot longer than that, and they were fascinating.
Oh, and they were furious too. And not to try to make a quip about anything. I think my favorite part is I think it was Lazarus who was stammering all over his words, trying not to say what he knew he had to say, and then trying to dodge the question by telling the House members how they should be doing their job when that wasn't even close to the question. I thought that was pretty telling. When you're a huge leftist and you're being asked about executive power with this president, and you are a quote-unquote constitutional scholar, you should know the law and our way of life better than anyone else, and you have to resort.
And let me tell everyone, when Shaun says "lar," he means law.
You've been hanging out with Clint for too long.
And we love him, even if he is disrespectful of the R's in the language.
I don't have to acknowledge them all. But that's really telling. And then when you get to the end of that, and it essentially says that once the government as a whole is no longer respecting the laws, that essentially says that the people don't have to either. That's scary that was said at a congressional hearing, and that there are those who, and rightfully so, and especially, I always tell people the information that we often get is months behind what those in Congress have. And they got into the, how many bombs the president have to drop before it's war, can the president enact war, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. But the fact that his acting can be That's the word I'm looking for. He essentially was saying that you can't ignore the Constitution one way or the other. Either failure to act or acting against it is still a violation of the Constitution. The word impeachment came out finally, which it was amazing because nobody ever wants to say it. And at some point, and I always bring up amnesty, and that brings me back to the federal government's orders on the INS not to deport illegals, especially those going south of the border, which if you can even find the border, it's so blurred now. But as soon as that came out, I said, wait a minute, how can he willingly go against our law to say you will not enforce that? Now, if he came out and said, hey, we found a huge problem with the deportation process and, there's been instances which citizens were deported or whatever, and we need to fix this before we move forward, that's rational and that's reasonable, and I can understand that. But when he just pretty much said, hey, you're going to ignore it until we can figure out something with amnesty, that's just egregious to me. And that shows you his respect or lack thereof that he has for our Constitution, our laws, our U.S. code, et cetera, in this country. And it's frightening that we have to have a Judiciary Hearing Committee today to explain that to a majority of the people in this country, because that's all this really is. This is more or less, I'm glad they did it, but this hearing was more or less a show, so maybe some low-informed people can maybe get some insight as to how our government works.
Yeah, but it was a pretty darn good show. If anybody thought, as far as I'm concerned, Obama is just megalomaniac. He really, really believes that he's the king, and what he says goes. When he says, "Don't mess with me on this. I've got it, and do not try to take me on," he's sending out a warning to SCOTUS. He's sending out a warning to the voters to just shut up and like what he's doing, because he knows better than everyone. When you see this guy, he is a case study in the advancement of Marxism.
Yes.
And everything that he's doing, the way he goes about this, it's even beyond Alinsky. It's really full-fledged Marxism. Hegel and Hegel's dialectic, everything contained in those studies is what Obama is doing. And I just wish every American could be given time off from work or whatever to listen to this, and then be given a refresher course on the Constitution and what it means to be a republic, and what our Constitution is supposed to mean. The fact that Obama, when he took the oath of office, put his hand on a Bible. I believe it was a Bible, not the Koran, like some people seem to be able to do now. But that he is supposed to defend against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
Yes.
And he is not doing that. What he's doing is he's tearing down our Constitution. And I'm sorry, folks, but as a woman of faith, there is the Bible, and as far as a man-made document goes, there is the Constitution. And the Constitution, to me, is as close to a sacred piece of writing as man will get. And it's sheer brilliance. It really was and is. I don't believe that it's an evolving, changing, fluid document. It meant what it meant, and it still means it today. But Obama is whittling away at it before our very eyes.
Well, and I've said this before. I don't believe that the Constitution is a living, breathing document. I believe that the laws we pass today obviously have to be in line with what is going on now. That being said, the first 10 in the Bill of Rights, they are natural laws, and they can't be touched. And that's one of the things the founder said is, hey, these are natural laws. These aren't us giving these to you. These are what you inherit by being on this earth. So those are off the board for any sort of anything. Anything we do after that, I understand the fact that as long as you're not taking those first 10 away, we do have to modify some things to meet modern day. Now, that doesn't mean that we give away free health care. That doesn't mean that we, redistribute wealth, anything like that. I believe that they all have to be written in line with the first 10, the writing of the Constitution, the founders' writings. And really need to reflect the brilliance of the founders and not do everything they can to stomp it out.
Yep, exactly.
And it doesn't happen. I mean, you look at healthcare, and it's 1,200 pages when it was passed. That alone, any law that gets passed that's 1,200 pages, and you
look how long the Constitution is.
Yeah, I know.
It's a fraction of that, and it's great.
It's not even a fraction is even giving it a lot. You know, it depends if you read it on single space or double space. It's amazing how direct and to the point our founders intentionally made our Constitution, so there was never any question about it.
There was no ambiguity. Hey, Shaun, Talk Radio 200 on Twitter just said, Obama didn't swear on the Bible. It was actually a copy of Dreams from My Father. That's awesome.
Oh, and now
he was having chum dreams at the time.
And I love the fact that all of a sudden in the chat room I'm starting to see rule of law, LAR, with respect to rule of law. Oh, they're going to hashtag it now. That's amazing.
You know how much everyone loves you because we all kid.
Oh, no, you know what? I deserve it. I deserve the abuse I get. I'm willing to be the martyr.
But it's fun. I like talking action. It's fun to listen to and fun to make fun of both.
Oh, it's definitely fun to make fun of. That's for dang sure.
And so do you always say dang when Clint is here?
Oh, hell no. I told you, I try to match the room, you know what I mean? If I was going to go in and I was going to speak to a women's conservative group, I would speak like a gentleman. If I was going to go speak to a men's conservative group, I'd speak like a gentleman. If I was going to go talk to my hockey team, I'm going to speak like a sailor. You know, that's just
front teeth.
Right, exactly. There are just certain things you do. You know, you always have the same message, but you adjust your jackassery to the group that you're trying to discuss. And right now, you are the group I'm trying to discuss. To heck with everyone else in the chat room. I joke, obviously. Not to hell with them. Keep listening, please. Download us numerous times over and over again and tell your friends. But you get into this, and it shocks me. And like I said, I had a discussion last week with a liberal who is trying to defend all these different actions. And I just said, you know, pull your head out of your ass and stop buying the smokescreen. It's okay to have buyer's remorse on this. Stop trying to hide it. You know what? You bought a lemon. Own it. You own that lemon. If you don't own that lemon, you're a hypocrite.
And the lemon's approval ratings right now, what are they, 37 to 39%, something?
Yeah, no, 37. And I don't know.
I think they're going to go lower, too.
I think they are, too. I think, you know, I really think that at some point somebody's going to finally put together articles of impeachment. I don't know if they'll go anything because I don't know if they'll go anywhere because I think there are too many people who are worried about the civil backlash, the people, how they'll react, the ones that aren't necessarily following what's going on.
Well, everybody knows that the only reason we would do that is because we're racist, right?
That would be the first
That's
try.
Exactly right. If we're criticizing Obama, we must be racist.
If you criticize Clint, you must be racist. I love it. Case in point, a couple months back, there was some guy that was attacking our good friend John Grant over at the 4 or 5 on Twitter, and John Grant equated Obama to a street corner salesman, never mentioned anything about race, or a street corner hustler, I believe, but he never said race, nothing. And the guy turned around, of course it's a white guy, liberal, who I think he admitted that he was a socialist and said, that's racist.
I think Obama's pretty much like a Ginsu knife salesman on late night TV, as he was telling everybody, but it's a good deal, it's a good plan, but wait, for just $19.99 more. But
you can now have amnesty, which I hate to tell you, folks.
You can now have Medicare.
Yeah. I want to jump to amnesty real quick. I know we only have a few minutes left. And, you know, somebody asked in the chat room, why is racist the worst thing in the world to be called? Racist isn't the worst thing in the world. It's number 2 behind pedophile.
Yeah.
And that's essentially what you're doing, and I use that equation all the time to people when they say, oh, that's, when they throw out the racist thing, and I'm like, that's like me walking into a bar full of people, pointing to one guy I barely knew anything about and go, hey, everyone, just so you know, he's a pedophile, and turn around and walk out. What do you think is the natural human reaction? Everyone's going to turn on that guy immediately.
It's revulsion.
He now has to prove that he's not a pedophile.
It's because they have no good response. They don't know how to debate. They don't know the art of argument, argument being a debate. They have no good facts on their side, so they pull out the race card, and that's what they use.
Absolutely, and it happens repeatedly. So speaking of ridiculous laws, amnesty is coming down the pike. We all knew this after Obamacare was implemented. And they're also going to use this as an Obamacare smokescreen, folks. I am telling you, this is going to be plastered by mainstream media everywhere they possibly can to start getting people away from Obamacare and start getting people to think that everybody on the right is a whole bunch of racists, and we don't want anyone to come into our country ever.
I am absolutely pro-immigration. I want it to be legal. My grandparents were from Norway. They did it legally. That's awesome. Illegally, sorry, we're a country of laws. What makes you think if you come here illegally, suddenly you're going to start doing everything by the book and abiding by the law? That's not the way it works.
Right. And listen, when it comes to immigration, if there are people here that have been doing it right the entire time, and they came here on the visa, they got the sponsor, they did everything they're supposed to do.
Did all the tough stuff.
You know what? I totally think that there should be a fast track for those folks. As long as they pass their background in the immigration citizens exam, which, by the way, if you go to The Atlantic, theatlantic.com.
I think you did pretty good.
You got what, a 59?
Yeah.
I got a 55. And you just search real quick, citizen quiz. It'll bring you to this quiz. It's an amazing quiz. It's from the best I can understand, it's one of the citizen exams that you have to take to become a citizen. I got a 55. I have a cousin of mine that failed miserably, which we all laughed, because her husband, who is a legal immigrant, passed with flying colors.
I suspect years ago, immigrants had to go through a tougher quiz.
Oh, much, much, much tougher. But, so now we talk about amnesty and...
I say just say no.
I say just say no, too. I wish, though, John Boehner agreed with us, because I don't know if you saw this. John Boehner just hired an ex-McCain chief of staff to lead the House Immigration.
Okay, all you had to say was McCain.
Exactly.
You didn't have me with McCain.
Her name is Rebecca Talent. She's the Director of Immigration Policy at the Bipartisan, that sounds so pretty, Policy Center, and she's going to be a special assistant to the Speaker starting Wednesday.
Bipartisan usually means that they suck up to the left.
Yeah, exactly. We give up everything, they give up nothing, and call it a day.
Yeah.
So this tells you, too, folks, that the GOP in mass, not necessarily the true conservatives in there, are ready to automatically start dealing with amnesty. And here's how they're going to do it. Mark my words. They are going to piecemeal it through. They're pretty much going to give the Democrats whatever they want, but they're going to piecemeal it through slowly but surely, highlight the things that they think are good, and try to hide the things that they don't necessarily agree with, but they want to do. That way they can't come out ever and say, you were against immigration, blah, 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 blah. It's going to be a complete smokescreen of immigration. They're going to put up a big fight at the beginning. We're against amnesty. We're not going to let this happen. It's not going to go through, but we know we have to take care of some people, so we're going to pass this one, and we're going to pass this one. Oh, we're going to sneak this one through too, et cetera, et cetera. And that is why I said earlier in the show, I don't necessarily think that the two-party system or that the conservatives and GOP need to be the same party.
Well, the GOP is not necessarily conservative anymore. There are some conservatives in there, but by and large, they're not acting as true conservatives.
As soon as, as soon as Boehner, and I'm so done with Boehner, which is what we call him here on the Sackheads Radio Show, I am so sick and tired.
He cries real well, but go home, John.
He is a huge progressive, and he is well and above It's not his words, and I tell everyone, you don't look at the words, you look at the action.
Yep.
And you look at his actions and the things that he's caved on, and you look at, he caved even with the shutdown, which, by the way, a federal survey that came out this week showed that there was no impact on the growth during the shutdown, the economic growth. So
I wanted them to keep it up. I was upset they caved.
So that alone, despite what Democrats tell you, was complete fabrication. That was a federal survey. That wasn't even something out of the Cato Institute or something like that, where the Dems can turn around and be like, "Oh, that's just a right-wing think tank." This came from a federal survey that showed some portions even expanded and grew. So that's all a lie. I know we have 90 seconds left, and of course I ran long, but amnesty's coming, folks. You need to start blowing up the phones at your leaders now, representatives, senators, and tell them exactly what you think, and let them know that if they support it, they're done. Because if they support amnesty in compilation with Obamacare, we are done so much more than we could possibly ever recover from. Tami, 60 seconds left. I yield to you.
I don't know what you want me to say, but thanks for having me on.
I want you to tell everyone, even though everyone should know it, if they don't know at this point, you tell me and I'll straighten them right out. But I want you to tell everyone that you can find them find you on Right Voice Media, the Black Sphere. You're the full-time fill-in host for Bill Post. You're at Tami J on Twitter. Let's see.
And the at Tami J is TAMIJ, because I was the first Tami J ever on Twitter in 2008. So I was an early adapter.
I believe they call that an OG.
Yes, and Right Voice Media is my website. I'm very, very proud of it. And so check me out.
And I'm gonna run a little long because I love Right Voice Media. I think it's a great place off the mainstream to really get some great insight and articles from people that are really paying attention. And you're giving a voice to people who don't necessarily have the ability to go mainstream media, to people like us here at the show with that smaller base that's trying to get the message out.
Yeah, and I've got some people. I've got a general that writes over there, and a couple majors, and people that are experts in firearms, people that are, pastors. That we've got a section for guns, for faith, for politics, for the arts. I do book and film reviews. It's an amazing site. It really is. It is a great site, and that is your brainchild, and you do an amazing job at it. And that's rightvoicemedia.com.
Yep. And if you have any questions, you can definitely hit the little contact us button at the very top and send as many emails as you possibly can to Tami, because she has all the time in the world. I answer every single email, and when people contact me on Twitter, if they email me at the Black Sphere thanking me for an article or something, I email them back. Everybody that's ever on my show, I send them an email thanking them, because that's how I roll. I'll tell you, you are a juggernaut of conservative thinking, and we appreciate you. We love you here on the show. I cannot thank you enough for sitting in for Clint, and you are just a gem as always, Tami. Thank you. Thanks for having me, Shaun. It's lots of fun. I get to be a little bit spunky and get you off on tangents, but I have a blast. Well, I love the fact that, and this kind of brings you back to the point really like earlier in the show that we said, this is the show where we kind of lash out and everyone says exactly what they want to say, and there's no, I have to be nice, blah, 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 per se. Everybody comes on. When our good friend Ken, the exceptional conservative, comes on, he does it. Rooster does it. You do it. Greg Phillips from Voters Trust and Jump Vote does it. That's what we love, is we're so for open discussion and saying exactly how you feel, because it needs to be done. So thank you for just making it awesome, Tim. You really are amazing. We love you so much, and you just keep up the great work. Thanks a lot, Shaun. I appreciate it. Check us out every Wednesday night at 8 o'clock Pacific, 11 on the East Coast at sackheadsradio.com. You can follow us on Twitter at Sackheads. We're also on Facebook. Please like our Facebook. We're trying to get that up and running. And you can always email us, sackheadsradio@gmail.com, and talk about how awesome Sacco is. For you are pretty awesome. For Tamara Jackson, Sacco on the board, I am Sackhead Shaun. Clint, hopefully will find his way back by next week. This is the Sackheads Radio Show. Thank you for joining us.